They called it the Registry of Life Bonds, but really it was more like a meat market with more paperwork and less meat. Rows of hopeful females lined the benches every cycle, each holding their application slip with trembling fingers, praying to be claimed by some male who wouldn't notice their flaws, or at least wouldn't mind them. The alien clerks clicked their pens and muttered in bored monotone, stamping forms like executioners marking the condemned. And every time the orphan girl stepped up, the result was the same: stamp, reject, next. Her file was a tragedy written in red ink. Parents unknown, bloodline uncertain, features mismatched. One alien claimed her horns were pathetically short. Another wrote, dermal pigmentation inconsistent with desirability. To her, it felt like being rejected for the crime of existing. She tried to smile, to appear cheerful, but it only made things worse. The clerks whispered, she's too eager. Must be desperate. As though being unwanted weren't already punishment enough. The cruelest part was the way the males looked at her, then looked through her. Their eyes slid past as if she were a chair or a bad smell. Each rejection stung less than the indifference. She wanted one of them to see her, not as a box unchecked or an error on a form, but as someone worth choosing. Was that too much to ask in a galaxy bursting with life? Meanwhile, the registry's waiting hall buzzed with snide commentary. The alien equivalent of frat boys leaned against the walls, critiquing each girl like auctioneers. Tentacle symmetry, excellent. Crest sheen, passable. Fertility marks, promising. When the orphan's turn came, the comments grew vicious. Crest dull. Eyes too small. Voice squeaks. Definitely a reject. She pretended not to hear, but her ears burned. Humorless cruelty was the air she breathed here. Yet the cruel world had a way of turning tragedy into absurdity. Some females, rejected as mates, were reclassified as companion livestock. The forms actually used that phrase. The orphan half expected her next rejection slip to read, better suited as decorative pet. She had to laugh sometimes, bitter as it was. If she didn't laugh, she'd cry, and she was tired of crying in bathrooms with paper-thin walls. Word spread among the rejected girls: humans were different. Strange, bold, oblivious to half the rules. A few whispered rumors claimed they would claim anyone, yes, anyone, as a mate. They said humans didn't even care about horn size or symmetry of ridges. They said humans prized things no one else valued, like humor, stubbornness, and the ridiculous ability to eat food that smelled like rot. The orphan clung to those rumors like a child clutches bedtime stories. If only she could meet one. But humans were rare here, and she had never been that lucky. Luck, for her, was usually the opposite. She was 23 cycles and already considered expired goods. Her peers had long been claimed, registered, settled into family pods. She alone was left to stand under the buzzing lights, rejected by one male after another. Too fragile, one said. Not enough stamina, another muttered. She wanted to snap back. Stamina? I've survived 23 cycles of rejection, you idiot. But sarcasm wasn't encouraged in the registry. The clerks added to the humiliation with their bureaucratic cruelty. They recited rejections with an air of ceremony, like priests conducting a funeral. This applicant has been assessed and found lacking. Return to waiting hall. Next. The words had become a refrain in her head, echoing in her dreams. Return to waiting hall. Next. Return to waiting hall. Next. Still, she kept showing up. Some said she was delusional. Others said she was pathetic. She told herself she was stubborn. Maybe that was the only human trait she possessed. Each cycle she dressed her best, buffed her crest until it almost shone, rehearsed her polite smile in the mirror. Each cycle she walked into that hall knowing exactly what would happen, yet praying it wouldn't. And each cycle she walked out with the same crushing emptiness. She developed coping mechanisms. One was gallows humor. When another girl asked how she endured it, she'd reply, easy. I imagine them naked. Turns out most males are less intimidating when you picture them with missing scales and saggy ridges. Sometimes it made the other girls laugh, sometimes it didn't. But the orphan lived on those rare sparks of laughter. The cruel part was that she knew she wasn't hideous. Her reflection showed a small, slender frame, yes, but also eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and a smile that lit up her face. She knew she wasn't the beauty standard, but she also knew she wasn't worthless. The problem was convincing anyone else of that. The problem was the system designed to make her believe the opposite. One day she overheard two clerks gossiping near the stamp table. "Poor thing's been rejected so many times, I'm surprised she keeps applying." The other clerk snorted. "Hope is a stubborn disease. Some beings don't know when to quit." Their laughter was sharp as knives. She wanted to slam their heads into their own stamp pads. Instead, she straightened her back and walked on, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her wilt. But deep inside, doubt gnawed at her. Was she truly hopeless? Would no one ever claim her? Would she die unclaimed, her file gathering dust in some back room, stamped reject in red ink until the end of time? Sometimes the thought woke her at night, clutching her blanket with silent tears streaming down her cheeks. And yet, beneath all the despair, a flicker of defiance remained. She fantasized that one day a male would storm into the registry, look past the flaws, and say, "I'll take her." She didn't even care if it was for the wrong reasons. She just wanted someone to see her, to mark her form not with rejection but with approval. She never imagined that fantasy would come true in the most absurd way possible. Not with a noble warrior, not with a wealthy merchant, not with an alien prince, but with a clueless, hungry human who mistook the registry line for a cafeteria queue. The day she met him, the day he raised his hand at the wrong moment, the day the clerk's stamps thundered in approval, that was the day her life twisted into comedy. But for now, she didn't know that yet. For now, she sat on the bench under the buzzing lights, clutching her slip, preparing for rejection number 212, muttering to herself like a mantra, "Maybe next time." Jake never planned on changing the course of an alien girl's life. He just wanted lunch. The human had been wandering the station corridors, stomach growling, eyes darting between signs in alien script that looked like decorative scratches on bathroom walls. Hunger made him reckless. He saw a crowd, a counter, clerk stamping slips, and thought cafeteria. The line moved forward, beings clutching papers like meal tickets. Perfect, he thought. Maybe today he'd finally get something other than ration bars that tasted like chalky despair. When his turn came, a clerk barked something incomprehensible. Jake assumed it was the alien equivalent of chicken or beef. He nodded enthusiastically and raised his hand. The clerk's eyes widened, then narrowed, then scribbled something furiously. Alarms pinged, lights flashed, and suddenly the crowd erupted in cheers. Jake blinked. He had no idea why ordering food involved a fanfare, but hey, he wasn't going to complain if it came with condiments. Before he could ask for a menu, a small figure darted from the side bench and clutched his arm like a drowning sailor seizing driftwood. The orphan girl. Her eyes shone as if the universe itself had just delivered salvation into her hands. "You claim me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief and joy. Jake froze. He replayed her words in his head. Claim? That wasn't a cafeteria term. Unless, maybe he had just signed up for a combo deal called the claim. He tried to keep up, plastering a polite smile on his face. Sure. Yeah. I'll claim that. Extra fries, please?" The clerk slammed a giant red stamp onto a form. "Approved." The word echoed through the hall. Another clerk handed Jake a thick packet of papers, rattling off terms and conditions in rapid-fire alien legalese. Jake understood none of it. He nodded anyway, because humans had learned one survival tactic in alien bureaucracies: smile and sign, then hope it wasn't a death warrant. The orphan practically bounced on her toes, tugging his arm closer. "You chose me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "After all this time, someone finally chose me." Jake chuckled nervously. "Well, I do get hungry a lot." The clerks gasped, misinterpreting his words as some bold human declaration of desire. One even fanned herself, murmuring, "Such audacity." No wonder their species is feared. Jake, oblivious, continued. So when do I get my food? The girl blinked. Food? I am your food? Jake nearly choked. What? No, no, no! Not what I meant. I mean, I thought this was… Never mind. Forget it. From that moment on, every word out of his mouth became a double-edged sword, slicing meaning one way for him and another way for everyone else. When the clerks asked if he would perform the duties of mate, Jake thought they meant chores. He puffed his chest and declared, I'll take out the trash, scrub the dishes, and fix anything that squeaks. The orphan blushed so deeply her crest shimmered. The clerks scribbled notes, like historians witnessing the dawn of a new age. The crowd outside whispered and gossiped as Jake was escorted out with his mate. The spectacle spread like wildfire through the station. An alien orphan, overlooked and mocked for cycles, had finally been claimed, and by a human, of all things. Some reacted with pity, others with envy, but most with sheer confusion. Why would a human want her? What did he see that no one else did? Jake, of course, saw nothing. He was too busy wondering why his lunch companion wouldn't let go of his arm. She clung like he might vanish as she blinked. Every step down the corridor she peppered him with questions. Do humans really bite during courtship? Is it true your species can go all night? What ritual will you demand first? Jake nearly tripped over his own feet. Lady, I don't know what you've heard, but I'm just trying to find a sandwich. The bureaucrats were relentless too. They thrust more documents into his hands, warning him that abandoning a mate carried penalties up to and including forced labor in the spice mines. Jake scanned the fine print, frowning. Wait. Are you saying I just married her? The clerk adjusted his spectacles. Claiming equals binding. Congratulations. Jake's jaw dropped. He wanted to protest, but the orphan squeezed his hand with such desperate joy that the words died in his throat. Her eyes glistened, her lips quivered, and she whispered, Don't take it back. Please. And just like that, his human heart betrayed him. He couldn't crush her hope. So he smiled weakly and muttered, Sure. Guess we're mates now. The whispers followed them like shadows. Aliens muttered about how brazen humans were, how unafraid to touch the unwanted, how they claimed without hesitation. Some laughed at the absurdity. Others speculated this was some cunning human strategy to infiltrate alien bloodlines. The orphan, however, basked in the sudden spotlight. For once she wasn't invisible. For once, they were all staring at her, and with envy. Jake still didn't understand what he'd stepped into. To him, it was a comedy of errors. To her, it was salvation. To everyone else, it was the scandal of the season. And the best part? Every time Jake opened his mouth, the galaxy heard innuendo. When he said, I guess I'll have to learn the ropes, the clerks blushed. When he grumbled, This is going to be a handful, the orphan giggled like a bride on her wedding night. And when he sighed, Fine, I'll take responsibility, the registry staff nearly fainted from the sheer weight of what they thought was human bravado. Jake only wanted a meal. Instead, he just ordered a lifetime commitment. And the orphan girl, who had been nobody's choice for so long, suddenly found herself the luckiest being in the universe, all thanks to a clueless human who thought the registry was a diner. Jake had never signed a lease before that involved both cohabitation and reproduction clauses, but apparently alien bureaucracy didn't bother separating them. By the time he finished skimming the documents, he was already being ushered into a tiny pod-sized living unit with the orphan girl at his side, looking like she just won the cosmic lottery. Jake, meanwhile, muttered under his breath, All this because I was hungry. The pod wasn't much. One narrow bed bolted to the wall, a single wash unit that made ominous bubbling sounds, and a kitchenette smaller than a janitor's closet. Jake dropped his bag on the floor, surveyed the cramped space, and exhaled. Great. Not even a couch. The orphan's face lit up. That means we must share the bed. Jake blinked. Yeah, sure, or I could just sleep on the floor. she gasped, scandalized. On the floor? But how would I fulfill my duties as your mate? The way she said duties made Jake swallow hard. He suddenly wasn't sure what was worse, the floor, or whatever she thought those duties entailed. That was the beginning of their awkward domestic life. Every chore, every routine task was laced with double meanings he couldn't untangle. When she brought him a plate of fruit, she leaned close and whispered, "Eat slowly, savor it, it's meant to awaken the body." Jake bit into the alien melon like a construction worker on lunch break. "Tastes like soap. Got any salt?" She blinked, then blushed furiously, as if he just insulted her foreplay. Alien rituals only made things worse. Apparently, proving one's worth as a mate involved a series of symbolic acts, all of which sounded like bad pickup lines. One night she announced, "You must carry me across the threshold puddle." Jake frowned at the ankle-deep puddle outside their pod. "You can walk, right?" She pouted. "It's tradition. It shows you are strong enough to bear my weight." Jake sighed, scooped her up, and trudged across the puddle. She clung to his neck, giggling breathlessly. "You're so firm." Jake nearly dropped her. "Lady, it's just my arms," she purred. "Arms are only the beginning." The station gossip didn't help. Other aliens watched with fascination as Jake performed chores, whispering as though they were witnessing legendary mating feats. "Look how he scrubs her dishes. Such stamina. Did you see the way he hauled that crate? The human truly claimed her well." Jake wanted to scream. He was just trying to keep their pod from smelling like fermented socks, but apparently the whole station thought he was some kind of exotic lover. The orphan, for her part, leaned into the attention. For once in her life, she wasn't invisible. Strangers stopped her in the corridors to marvel. "So this is your human?" She glowed under the spotlight, proudly announcing. "Yes, he chose me. He fulfills all duties." Jake choked every time she said it. Duties. Always duties. He wondered if that word even meant the same thing in her language, or if she just enjoyed watching him squirm. Despite the misunderstandings, Jake couldn't help noticing she had a wit that cut sharper than any bureaucrat's pen. When he complained about the endless forms they had to file, she smirked. "Now you know how many cycles I spent being stamped reject." When he muttered about their tiny bed, she quipped, "If you're worried about space, just get on top." He spluttered, turned crimson, and she burst out laughing. For someone who had suffered so much rejection, she carried humor like a weapon, using it to slash through years of bitterness. Their bond grew in strange ways. She insisted on teaching him alien customs, most of which he butchered spectacularly. During one fertility blessing, he mispronounced a phrase so badly it came out as, "I volunteer as livestock." The officiator nearly fainted, while the orphan laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks. Another time, he tried to imitate her species' courtship dance, which involved elaborate tail movements he obviously lacked. So he improvised with his hips. The audience gasped, the orphan blushed, and Jake had to be dragged off the floor before things escalated further. The funniest part was how mundane human habits became exotic marvels. Jake brushed his teeth and spit in the sink, and she stared in awe. "You expel toxins with such force," Jake replied dryly. "Yeah, dentists back home love that trick." When he brewed coffee from the instant packets he'd smuggled along, she sniffed it cautiously, then declared, "This must be a stimulant ritual to prepare you for mating." He took a sip, groaning with pleasure, and she nearly fainted from embarrassment. "Stop making that sound in public!" For Jake, it was a daily gauntlet of unintentional innuendo. Every time he said something innocent, she twisted it into something suggestive. When he told her, "I'll fix that leaky pipe," she purred, "I'm sure you will." When he muttered, "This is harder than it looks," she giggled. When he sighed, "I need a nap," she cooed. "Already? We've only just begun." By the end of the week, Jake considered sewing his mouth shut. Yet beneath the comedy, a subtle shift crept in. She wasn't just the orphan anymore. She was quick, mischievous, surprisingly brave. She had endured more rejection than most could bear, Yet here she was, teasing him, laughing, leaning into life like she finally belonged. And damn it, Jake found himself liking her. Not just tolerating, not just humoring, actually liking her. One night, crammed together in the narrow bed, she whispered, "Do you regret it?" Jake, half asleep, mumbled, "Regret what?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Choosing me." His eyes opened. For once, he understood the weight beneath the jokes, the insecurity behind her laughter. He turned, met her gaze in the dim light, and said, "I regret a lot of things. But not you." She blinked, stunned, then smiled so wide it nearly broke his chest. Of course, the moment was ruined when he added, "Still regret missing lunch that day." She smacked him with a pillow. That was life now. A comedy of misunderstandings, a circus of double meanings, a human and an alien girl fumbling through, mate life, with the grace of two drunks on stilts. And yet, for all the chaos, Jake realized he hadn't laughed this much in years. Maybe, just maybe, the bureaucrats hadn't made a mistake after all. The rumor mill didn't just churn, it exploded. By the end of the month, half the station believed the human and the orphan girl were locked in some kind of legendary passion, while the other half debated whether Jake was conducting a social experiment. Every corridor they walked down became a gauntlet of stares and whispers. Aliens would nudge each other, murmur things like, "That's the one who claimed her," or, "Look how satisfied she looks. Humans must have stamina beyond measure." Jake wanted to yell that all they'd done was argue over who got the bigger half of a blanket. The attention soon turned official. The Bureau of Mate Registrations demanded proof that their pairing was genuine. Apparently, a human claiming an overlooked alien orphan was such a statistical anomaly that it triggered suspicion. So Jake found himself summoned before a tribunal where robed officials asked invasive questions like, "How many times per night do you consummate?" Jake nearly spat his drink. "Consu what? I thought this was about housing forms." The orphan, crimson from crest to toes, squeaked, "He is very thorough." The judges nodded sagely, scribbling notes. Jake covered his face with his hands. The proof didn't stop there. They were required to demonstrate compatibility through public challenges. First was the test of provision, where Jake had to prove he could feed her. He rummaged in his pack and pulled out an old human ration bar. She nibbled it, grimaced, and declared, "It tastes like rubber." The audience gasped, clearly impressed by the exotic human delicacy. "Truly," one whispered. "He feeds her from his own stores." "Intimate," Jake muttered. "I just wanted to get rid of that thing." Next was the test of endurance, which involved hauling her across a series of steps while reciting vows. Jake groaned halfway through, nearly dropping her. She laughed into his ear, whispering, "Don't quit now, everyone's watching." The crowd misread his struggle as some bold human tradition of showing off strength by nearly collapsing. When he finally set her down, sweaty and panting, the officiator announced, "He passes with flying colors." "Such stamina!" Jake wheezed. "Yeah, I'm real impressive." The final test was the most outrageous, the intimacy trial. They had to spend an entire night in a transparent pod, visible to judges behind tinted glass. Jake froze when he saw the setup. "Wait, you mean they're going to watch us sleep?" The orphan nodded solemnly. "They must confirm our union is real." Jake stared at the pod, then at her, then muttered, "Of all the dumb science fiction tropes, I had to land in this one." Inside the pod, the farce only grew. The bed was barely wider than a coffin. He shifted to one side, she shifted with him. He rolled to the other, she followed. "Why are you glued to me?" he hissed. She whispered back, "They'll think we're distant. We must appear close." He groaned. "I'm sweating buckets, and you're pressed against me like cling wrap. How is this romantic?" She smirked. To them, it looks very convincing. Every movement drew gasps from the shadowed silhouettes outside the glass. When Jake muttered, "I just need to get comfortable," the judges scribbled notes furiously. When the orphan sighed, "You're heavy," The audience swooned at the innuendo. When Jake accidentally yanked the blanket off, baring his chest, the room erupted in applause. By the end of the night, Jake was convinced the tribunal now thought humans were half gods, half circus acts. They passed. The bureaus stamped their union as official and binding, sealing it in records that would outlive them both. Jake, exhausted, slumped into his chair outside the hall. Great! We're officially the galaxy's weirdest couple. The orphan sat beside him, pride radiating from every inch of her. You chose me, even when everyone else laughed. That's all that matters. Jake rubbed his temples. I chose a sandwich. Somehow I got you instead. She giggled, leaning against him. Then I am your sandwich now. Jake nearly choked, which only made her laugh harder. Word of their trials spread beyond the station. Other orphans whispered about finding humans to claim them. Alien scholars published papers titled, On the Mating Tenacity of Homo sapiens. Traders began offering human endurance elixirs as knockoff products. Jake's face even ended up on posters with slogans like, Claim boldly, love fiercely, the human way. He wanted to rip every poster down. The orphan collected them proudly, hanging them on their pod wall like trophies. Their daily life didn't get easier, it just became more absurd. Every slip of Jake's tongue became a proverb. Once, while fixing the bed frame, he grumbled. Takes a lot of screwing to keep this thing together. She nearly fell off the mattress laughing. By morning, someone had spray-painted the phrase on a station bulkhead. Another time, frustrated at a broken pipe, he yelled, I can't handle this pressure. Within hours, it was being quoted in a self-help seminar. Yet for all the chaos, something undeniable simmered between them. Jake found himself watching her laugh, noticing how her eyes crinkled in ways no bureaucratic stamp could capture. She found herself leaning into his sarcasm, relishing the way he refused to treat her like fragile glass. Somewhere between the paperwork, the trials, and the endless innuendos, they had stumbled into something real. One night, as they argued over who got more blanket again, she asked softly, Would you have chosen me if you knew what you were signing up for? Jake stared at the ceiling, then chuckled. Honestly? No. But now? Yeah. I'd do it again. She smiled, pulling the blanket tighter around both of them. Then I am glad you were hungry that day. And just like that, the faceless bureaucracy had turned into the strangest love story the station had ever seen. The orphan no one wanted now had a mate, and the human who only wanted lunch now had a partner who filled his days with laughter, exasperation, and far too many innuendos. Somewhere in the background, rumors continued to swirl, scholars debated, and officials stamped papers, but in their tiny pod, squabbling over space in the too small bed, Jake realized the absurd truth. He hadn't just claimed her. She had claimed him too.